right, Slick Talkers, we're back. And in this episode, I'm excited because I usually avoid having guests that are very well spoken when it comes to the real estate and the capital side of hospitality. Because you know me, I'm a traditional operator. I don't touch that side of the business. Obviously, we want to ensure good returns for owners and investors. But this is all new stuff for me. So I hope you're going to learn something. I know I am. Jake, I want to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking time to join me. Big fan of your show, by the way. I know there's going to be tons we're going to talk about. And before we jump into Masters of Moments, I want to actually kind of discover your background first, kind of what got you into hotels, but specifically the real estate side. I found your story quite interesting. So I'd love to know, where was that beginning moment for you?
Well, like every person in the hotel business, I think that's successful, they've always worked in a hotel themselves. And that's where my story started. My dad was in the hotel business and I would go to work with him and I held every job in the hotel, but my favorites were being a barback, which is where you stock liquor for an event. And I was doing this when I was like 12 years old. So it's probably completely illegal. But I had the key to the liquor cabinet and I was too young to even care about alcohol anyways. And I would just lug ice and beer and liquor to the bars for events. Our company and my dad is known for food and beverage. So for me to start there was great. Then I moved into the kitchen side. Then I rotated through all areas of hotel, housekeeping, engineering. The president of our management company now still remembers the highlight of his day, which was asking me to power wash geese poop off a sidewalk. And I remember driving around scissor lifts and all this stuff and had my dad run out and flip out that I was driving around on these things. But that's how I started in hotels. But it also taught me that while I love the operation side of the business, I really wanted to focus on the capital side because from what I saw, other friends and family friends in real estate, the capital side is really how you grow the business and how you grow the platform. And you could be the greatest operator in the world and maybe you get your shot and people ask you to manage hotels for them and do it. But most often you have to create your own path. So by starting on the capital side, I kind of laid out the path to grow our management business. Whereas some people, maybe Four Seasons is the most famous example, they had the opportunity they did their first deal, but then grow really from the management side. I, didn't think we had enough of an edge at that time to grow from the management side, or I just really like the capital side. I don't know, but I chose the capital side first.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would say it's good that you went the operations route first before capital. I think that probably gave you the edge, the upside that you were kind of maybe looking for. Because I think I in my encounter of hotel operations, I ran into a lot of people that were on the real estate or the capital side, yet they were still blown away by the simple things on the front desk, right? And you're like, oh, you never worked a front desk, but you're funding this deal, or you bought this hotel. How can you buy a hotel without knowing the inner workings? It was a whole new world for me. So did you kind of experience the same thing once you transitioned from operations to capital, or was the capital world, did it feel natural for you?
Well, first off, I think what people underestimate with hospitality investing is that it's a real estate investment and a fully operating business. One hotel is its own little world, its own little operating business, and it's very different from every other asset class. So in your experience, it's very common because most people think, oh, it's just like every other real estate where you get 100%. A lease check and that's it. But it's completely different. The way that it kind of is most apparent, I think, is when operators talk to mostly people with a capital background. And whether it's mean or not mean, I don't know. But the operators that I know would typically refer to those people as Cornell kids, but not Cornell hotel kids that grew up on the operations side. Cornell kids that just grew up on the capital side, went to work for a REIT or a private equity firm or whatever, and they were underwriting deals with no real concept of what it takes to run a hotel. So it's oh, well, why are you assuming those margins? Oh, because, I don't know, we're buying it at a 30% NOI. We should be able to just ratchet it up to 35 because those guys don't know what they're doing. Well, what would you do? Oh, we're just going to manage it better. So those are the Cornell kids comments that I would often get. And one of the unique things about us is we're vertically integrated. So we do both the capital side and the management side. And when I started, I felt like I already knew the operations side because I grew into that and I grew up with it. I didn't know the capital side at all. My dad didn't really raise capital from outside investors. We weren't backed by a private equity firm. So that was really nothing that I ever saw. We had like one family as our partner, and it was owned and held, or the hotels that we did were owned in that way. So I wanted to get exposure to something that I didn't have exposure to. And I started off working for other people's hotel companies. So I worked for Hirsch Hospitality Trust, which was a REIT. And then I worked for the core group, Brad Corzin, who at the time was growing the Viceroy brand. And he was doing it in a very similar way that I want to do it. And I learned a lot from those guys, Brian DeLoe, who's now running Proper. And basically, they created this amazing management company, and then they raised capital to grow the investment side of the business alongside the management side. And ultimately, that's what I wanted to do because I thought there was more opportunity to build wealth with the capital side.
I love that. And it's a very interesting world because in my opinion, like just from my experience, I never got exposed to it. So I didn't even know it existed until kind of getting in deep, later on down the road. And shout out to Brian DeLoe. He was actually like my idol when I was a hotel manager. I was like, I want to be just like this guy. This guy's sick. Then he followed me on Instagram one day and I was like, I lost my shit. It was a good time. But that was, pre-COVID 2018. So much fun. Anyways, it's such a different world. And I want to know, when you jumped in and you got into the capital side, working for that REIT first, what surprised you the most? Was there anything that caught you off guard with coming into the capital world? Or did you feel like you were pretty well prepared getting into that segment and understanding that you would have to take off your operator's cap probably for some part to understand the capital piece a little bit more?
What I thought was really interesting working for Hirsch Hospitality Trust is they already had all the capital they needed. So they were looking at acquisitions, but not at all really focusing on raising capital. They were just trying to find deals that met their requirements. And what I think was most interesting about my time there is I really learned the rigor of underwriting and due diligence, because while they started as a small company, family-run business, they really grew into a beautiful institutional firm, and they had a management side too. So I was always focused on the investment side there, and I learned how to collaborate with the management folks, but I really learned like hardcore underwriting, building models, looking at models, analyzing the real estate transactional process. And I actually didn't spend that much time focused on operational upside because they had such a wide portfolio. We could really look at all their data. And they had this thing at the time, it was pretty novel. It's called Brains. And they basically aggregated all this data from all their hotels. So I would just log into Brains and see what they were doing at comparable hotels and then underwrite based on that. So it was really cool because a lot of people don't get that experience. If you have a smaller company and you have different kinds of hotels in different markets, you can't just aggregate data in that way to make really good decisions. So most of my time was actually spent just like underwriting the deal and focusing on the financial metrics and how they were going to think about the debt and how they were going to think about asset managing the property, and less so on the operations side.
It's very fascinating. What was your career like in the capital side before you are where you are today? How has that road unraveled?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So I went to University of Miami. I studied finance, and this was graduated in 2008. So this was like when the whole financial crisis was really just completely melting down. And like every young entrepreneurial kid, like I wanted to go out and start doing deals, and I didn't want to stay in school, and I just wanted to get out there. But my father-in-law actually gave me some amazing advice, and he said, go to law school. And I graduated and went right into law school. So I'd been preparing for this. But the summer before law school, I actually worked for Core. And that for me was really kind of like my pivot point. It was like, do I want to like get into law school, not go, and then go into hotels? Or do I want to take some time and actually learn to think, grow, mature, learn from other people? And my father-in-law gave me some great advice. And he said, you know what? I know 3 years seems like a lot of time today, but when you look back on this 20 years ago, 3 years is going to seem like a flash in the pan. And that was 100% correct. So what I would coach anyone, when you're young, you can ask people for things. You can go open any door. You can make a ton of mistakes. Go make those mistakes in your 20s. And while you're doing that, get an education. And I don't think law school at all was a waste of money. I don't think it was a waste of time. I literally use my legal expertise and background every single day. I've never practiced a day in my life. The kind of like the moment I graduated law school, I went on a trip with my then girlfriend, now wife, and we passed the bar. And I came back and immediately started underwriting hotel deals. And at the time, I wanted to raise like a hotel fund. And I thought it would be kind of easy. I was like, yeah, I work for Hersha, I work for Core. Like my dad's got this management company. I'm going to raise a $30 million fund. Like I'll go around friends and family and we'll go out and do some deals. Literally fell flat on my face. It was a complete failure because no one wanted to back someone in a fund structure with no track record. And they're like, well, your dad has a track record, but you have no track record. And also, I don't even know what you're going to be investing in. So basically, the fund idea blew up. I found an opportunity through our relationships in Philadelphia. Someone wanted to develop a hotel. They were kind of ready to go on the finish line, and they needed a hotel expert, a hotel company to legitimize the deal to go get debt financing. So basically started underwriting that deal, tried to raise money for that deal for our side of the deal. It was really difficult, took a long time, finally got over the finish line, and that was the first deal.
It's incredible. I want to touch on a piece that you briefly mentioned, if we can. Did you feel like you were, when you got through graduation of college and you're like, I want to go do this fund, and you hear the comments and the feedback of, well, your dad has this track record, you don't. Did you feel like you had to live up to a certain expectation due to that? Or what was that kind of process being, coming out of the shadow of your father to becoming your own man and your own business person too?
I thought it'd be foolish not to take the advantage that I was given in life and not to take advantage of that advantage. And that was the fact that my dad already had a management company. So I had some credibility, and I also had some infrastructure to bring to what I wanted to do. But my dad had no interest in raising capital. Like my dad, when I was raising the fund, he's like, I don't raise capital from other people. Like you can go do that and then like use my name, but like I'm not going to help you raise any of the capital. And that was probably one of the reasons why the fund idea failed. But then even when I was going and raising money for just the one deal, it was incredibly hard because my dad didn't have this investor network that I could tap into. So literally it was just word of mouth. And I did feel a lot of pressure to succeed because I was doing something different from him. I also felt a lot of pressure because at the time, the company that my dad had, it was 3 hotels. It was my dad and it was Eric, who's now the president of our management company. But like, they didn't need me to do anything. So I would just be like kind of sucking on the, management company payroll, but like, I wouldn't be doing anything. So I felt a lot of pressure to create my own way because I didn't see a real opening in the company for me. And the opportunity that I saw was not to just do what my dad was doing, it was to add the capital component to what he was doing.
Did he see it that same way too, in the sense of this is adding to the management, not taking away, or kind of watering down or kind of muddying the water at all? Or kind of how did that relationship work?
My dad, I think, only saw it in the way of like, I want to grow the management company. And this was a way to grow the management company. I always viewed it a little bit differently. I wanted to grow the management company, but also grow the enterprise value of an investment company. Like when you look at Blackstone or Starwood, their business that those guys have built has value beyond the real estate investments. And I wanted to create a company that managed and invested in real estate, happens to be hotels, with that sort of value would be great, but with value on its own. And we like any father and son, there's definitely friction, but I think my dad was really supportive. And to his credit, I think a lot of other men like that at that age, that demographic might have basically said, oh yeah, that capital idea, that's a good idea. Like I'm going to own, 90% of that business and you can have 10% and you go do all the work and do it. And the way that we set it up is like 50-50. And that was a kind of unique arrangement. And I think my dad had a level of, foresight into what the company could become, but also a level of humility that he didn't have that component and he also didn't want to do that. So I was, I think, lucky in that sense that what I thought I wanted to do for a business was somewhat in alignment with what he wanted to do. Now, we've had like the biggest fights ever and have had blowouts, but I can't remember a time where we haven't, eventually seen eye to eye on something. And now, when I was like always in college, he would always say like, oh, I'm going to have 10 hotels when you graduate college. And when I graduated college, he had 3 hotels. But now we manage over 10 hotels and we have investments in 17 hotels. So we're finally there. And I think the strategy that we took, there could have been a couple different ways, but it worked out okay for us.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys knew what seat you belonged in and didn't try to override the other person's role in the vehicle, if that makes sense.
100%. Now, don't get me wrong. There's 100 times where I tried to, tell my dad he was an idiot and didn't know what the hell he was talking about. And he told me the same thing. But I think we both kind of sucked it up and went and knew where our strengths were. But it's also something that, like, if I was talking to another father-son, like, you have to work on it. Like, we had, later on, we had coaching and stuff like that, because it's really important, whether it's your dad or your business partner, to like always check in on your alignment and to see what the vision is from both parties.
Yeah. And in such a new day and age, correct me if I'm wrong, are you guys all in one location? Are you a remote team? How's that work? It's because I'm seeing the more remote everyone is, I'm like, okay, you have to kind of almost beat that kind of vision and roadmap into a lot of conversations, probably more often than you would if you were in person. So I'd love to know your guys' setup there.
Let's talk about like just general, and then I'll like go into some specifics. So generally, we have an office in Fort Lauderdale and we have an office in Philadelphia. The basis of the office in Fort Lauderdale was I went to University of Miami and then I went to law school down here as well. And for whatever reason, I just never wanted to move back to Philadelphia. I think you're in Denver now. Like Denver's a beautiful place. Like you just want to live in a great place. I never wanted to live in Philadelphia and I wanted to live in Florida. So I'm like, I'm going to start my own business down here with my dad and I'm going to have an office here. And for a while, the office was literally just me. And like, it was just me by myself sitting in a room. And that was tough actually. And then it evolved and we grew a team down here. So now basically in Florida, it's mostly our investment team and the president of our management company. Some people from our revenue side are based here in Florida. And then we have culture, people, accounting in Philadelphia. And then actually post-COVID, now our accounting team is mostly based in Texas. If you asked my dad if we would ever have like remote offices kind of like that, like satellite offices, his head would have exploded pre-COVID. And we actually have a couple people on our team that are in the Philippines that we speak to every day. They work US hours and his head, really would have exploded then. So that's interesting, but we don't have a work from home policy. So if we make the decision to hire someone who doesn't live where one of our offices are, then we would make an exception. Like obviously that person has to work from home, or maybe if there's enough of them, they set up an office, kind of like what we have in Texas. But we don't have a work from home policy, but we are flexible in the sense that everyone like in a corporate culture is kind of working nonstop. I think a lot of people are. So if you want to go see your kid's school play, like, I don't care, go leave early. I know that you're going to get this stuff done. If you don't get it done, it's really obvious because we use all this data to track what everyone's doing and what everyone's up to. So that I think is a huge thing, but in-person collaboration is very important. And we have like set meetings at our company where the expectation is that if you're in Philadelphia and we're having a team meeting, you should come to the office in Philadelphia, even if you're remote. If you're in Florida, same thing. but most of the team works in those 2 offices. And it was always different, I think, on the hotel side because, during COVID, there was no work from home. Like if we worked from home, my hotel would close. Yeah. And the nice part about us being a management company too, is we still had that mentality. If you were a standalone investment company, there was someone else managing your hotel. You literally could work from home. But for us, like it wouldn't be right if we were working from home, but our managers had to this is the time when, remember, it was crazy. Like people were wearing masks, but then you had to someone would get up from a chair in the lobby and then you had to hire someone to scurry over there and hazmat suit vacuum that chair down. It was intense. Yeah. I'm glad those days are over, but yeah.
You and me both. You and me both, my friend. And the reason why I asked the office question, not only on the sense of, because in my head, I'm thinking capital side only, right? Not management. That's a whole new beast. But capital side, I feel like you could be super remote. But when I was listening to your episode of your podcast with Isaac French called Masters of Moments podcast, you asked him specifically because he was talking about how he built his own office and workspace. And you stated the question, first time entrepreneur, normally you don't go out of your way to build an office and to create this space and to do all that, especially when you're just starting. It's an expense that you probably don't need, X, Y, and Z things, right? So for you just said that it was just you out in Florida, which I don't blame you for staying there, especially Fort Lauderdale. I would have stayed there too. I would not have gone back to Philly or moved to Philly. So good on you. But you said it was hard. It was just you. And so kind of walk me through that beginning phase, especially as your first, I would say, solo venture, even though you're partners with your father. I would love to know kind of you're the one making this thing happen. Without Jake, the capital side just didn't really happen, it sounds like. So being by yourself, walk me through that initial phase.
So I think the thing that I was keying in on with Isaac and what you're keying in on is a concept called flow. And I think in any business, you want to be in the flow. And being in the flow might be being around other people that are also in that business. It might be around being other people that are thinking of the same things you are. Or it might be if you're doing some glamping tent thing, being actually in the mountains in the tents doing that. And I think that's really important. And what I was not concerned about Isaac is it's if you are too isolated from other people, you might miss investors, you might miss potential deals, you might miss the opportunity to just meet with people spontaneously that are coming through town. And there's real value, particularly when you're starting your business, for those types of interaction. So when I was starting my business, I wanted to have the ritual of getting dressed in normal clothes, going to an office. So this was kind of before WeWork. So I basically they had a knockoff WeWork thing in Miami, and I got a WeWork thing. And at first, I was just cheap. The company was basically zero. So I was kind of in the bullpen with everybody. And it didn't really work because I was sitting next to and not knocking any other professions, but just the level of confidentiality and the stakes, the risks are just very different. I was in between a DJ, I think, and a wedding photographer. And I'm trying to put together this $50 million deal. And it just was just talking out in the open. It felt awkward. So then I went and I got a private office there. And that worked out. And eventually, my wife's family had a big company, and then I moved into their company. And then eventually, as things kept going, as deals kept rolling. By the way, this is 4 or 5 years in. This isn't day one. I got an office in a real building. And at the time, I thought that was important. I think it was important to have a presence in a building. I knew I wanted to expand and bring on some more people. So we had the space to do that. But it was real weird when I only had one deal to work on and it was just me alone. And it forced me to do a lot of reading actually, and a lot of kind of online discovery. So this is before Twitter. Well, this is before what Twitter is now, before what LinkedIn is now. So I would read constantly. And what I would do is I had a list of 20 or 30 friends I would just send articles to or interesting things to, little insights, little ideas. And that was what I would do to fill my time. But there were definitely times where I would sit there and I'd be I don't know, I don't have a deal. I don't have anything to work on. What am I doing? And that's the struggle of an entrepreneur. but it's also the struggle of a hotel person that has a real specific focus area because there's not that many hotel deals out there. So I think what that taught me is patience, and that most people's stories don't involve get rich quick schemes. And it also allowed me time to just kind of hone into certain things and practices that I still do today. Now, looking back, I probably could have improved on a lot of other things and fixed things, but I did gain some skills just being by myself.
What skills specifically? Like I for myself work from home, basically at my own office. I don't go in anywhere. I don't see anybody. I'm wearing, Lululemon sweats right now. So, real cash. But what was like some of the skills that you feel like you needed to learn to be by yourself inside that office before even kind of growing a team and going kind of beyond just the Jake show?
Writing and letter writing, emails, and investor reporting, I think, were a couple of key skills because I had the time to really be thoughtful about what I was reporting about or updates I was giving or email I was sending. That is incredibly important because I think a lot of people, a lot of LPs are frustrated by reports that they get from their GPs or people that they invest with. I take an incredible amount of pride, and still to this day, we're actually the first quarter 2024, we're releasing a completely new investor reporting framework and structure. It's going to look completely different from the ones that we've been using for the past 2 years. And that's still iterating. The other thing that I learned is and I kind of learned this from law school too, and it sounds obvious. Someone posted on Twitter, if you're not reading a contract, that's the quickest way to get into a lawsuit. And that is. So because I had no one to talk to, really nothing to do, I read every single word of every single contract. And my dad has this great line, and I think it applies to everyone. And it is, a lawyer is only as good as his client. And I had the benefit of going to law school, but I think anyone, whether you went to law school or not, now with ChatGPT and all this other stuff, if you spent the time reading contracts and reading agreements, it is so valuable, and you could be, so dangerous.
That's really good. That's really good. I'm curious, with your podcast, Masters of Moments, you've set this kind of foothold in the industry from an outside perspective that is kind of looked at as the go. If I want to learn about hotel real estate and capital investment there, I'm going to your show. I'm not going anywhere else, especially if I just type in, on Apple or Spotify and your show's the first one to come up like it is, then yeah, I'm sticking with that. What did you have getting started to look for, to listen to read? Who was kind of your resource? Because now, as you've got your own show, I'm sure you're hearing a lot of people say dude, I listen to your show all the time. It's helped me so much. Da, 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 da. So I'd love to know, what was your kind of initial inspiration and moment of resource?
The short answer is there was basically nothing. And, there was no real Twitter of successful people or business people talking about what they do. And what I would do is I would write emails or letters to people that seemed interesting and seemed like they were important in business, and just try and meet with them and have coffee. And one time I read the Isidore Sharp Four Seasons book, an amazing book for everyone in hospitality to read. I'm sure you've read it, Will. And I wrote Isidore Sharp a letter after I finished the book, and I FedExed it. And I remember in the book, it mentioned his assistant. So I figured all that out, and I FedExed it because I'm if I FedEx it, she's going to have to sign for it, and this thing's getting opened. Yeah. And sure enough, it got signed for, whatever. And 2 days later, they emailed me, and I'm I'll do whatever. I'll come out to Toronto, meet with you. And he ended up, I stayed at the Four Seasons, and the meeting was only booked for an hour. And Mr. Sharp was the nicest man possible. And it was just awe-inspiring walking into this big company. I'm all this is Four Seasons? It was wild. And he was yeah, I was just in a design meeting, da-da-da. And it was super formal. So I remember I was wearing a suit and tie, and his driver picked me up from the hotel. And we talked. And then he's hey, why don't you hang around for a little bit longer? We'll go to lunch. And we went to lunch together. And one of the things I was so fascinated, because again, I had just at that time I was working for Hersha. So all I knew was I saw what Hersha had. He had a whole cafeteria just in Four Seasons. And this was like, you'd only think about that at Google. And one of the things he told me at lunch, which, I'll never forget, and that was about trust and about like hiring and about people, because one of the things that I was concerned about in growing my business, because I think my dad struggled with this, he only had 3 hotels, is delegating. And how do you find people that are going to do it as well as you are going to do it? And what Mr. Sharp told me is he said, if you can't implicitly trust someone, then they're against you. And that's black and white. That's not like, well, maybe they're kind of going to be okay. He said, no, if you can't implicitly trust someone, they're working against you. And that was really interesting. The other thing I learned on delegation was you have to accept the fact that you're not going to be perfect every time. So if you have 3 hotels, you're going to execute perfectly every single time, 100% of the time. But maybe someone over here has 30 hotels and they're going to execute 95% of the time or 90% of the time. Well, they still have 30 hotels and they're executing 90% of the time. So you might have to give up a little bit to get what you're missing or what you're seeking. Or maybe your goal is to just have 3 hotels and hit home runs every time.
I can only imagine how good that hour and that lunch is or was with Isidore Sharp. Like
it was
you got
cool.
me one. I was gonna say that's a special story. That's like,
well, I mean,
tough.
So that's how I got the internship at Core too. And I'd encourage anyone to like reach out to me or like, reach out to anyone. So I emailed Brad Corzin or I wrote him a letter. It's like the same thing. And I met him for lunch. And then he's like, I'd consider having you as an intern for the summer. And then I had an interview with Brian DeLoe and we met at like a bar, one of their hotels, like really cool. Thought it was so neat. Like, oh man, this is where I want to be. This is everything. And and that's how it happened.
Jeez, that's so cool. What a story. I could end the podcast there. That's how cool that is. No, it's super sweet. So you had that experience to look into. So there wasn't really anything during your time. Like you didn't have the Jake Wurzak of your starting phase of entrepreneurship. You had the Isidore Sharps, the Brian DeLoes. Like that was your source of inspiration.
Barry Sternlicht for me was kind of always like the Michael Jordan. Like that was, you like heard about him. But there was actually even this blog where this like, I don't know if you remember this. There was like a guy who was like a fan of like Starwood Capital Group. It's like a weird thing. Like you wouldn't really find, it's like a real estate investment company. And he had a blog and the blog was about like everything that Starwood was doing. I wonder what this guy's doing now. It's kind of interesting. So I would like read the blog and then when he would have like an update, I'd be like, oh my God, this is great. And eventually I got to meet him and work with Barry as well. But I'd never had a relationship or never got to learn from him before I started working with him. It would just all be like watching and seeing what other people are doing. And the coolest thing about hotels is you don't have to know someone to go see their work and experience their work. You can go into any great hotel, any cool property and see someone's vision, see what they're doing. And thinking about your question, I probably learned the most traveling with my family or traveling on my own or going to cool hotels like in New York or Miami, like when these boutique hotels were coming up. That was pretty formational for me.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It's the hotel world that I do really miss. I told you before recording, right? I'm on the vacation rental side more now than not, but I do miss that kind of being your office, like walking to the lobby, feeling that kind of, I don't know, just that energy that you can feel when the front desk is looking good, the bar is humming, you got the lobby, people are sitting everywhere. Just it's so fun. And there is something about that type of energy that does create some inspiration. I'm very curious. So you earlier in the episode mentioned, I think 17 investments in hotels. What does your guys' portfolio, and this is with Dove Hill Capital. So please correct me if I'm wrong on any of the names or the specific metrics and numbers, but 17 investments is a big amount, especially going from the 3 hotels that you were originally at with your father to now having this portfolio of capital deployed. What has been the biggest learnings along the way? And then I have a second follow-up question for you for the listeners directly, but I want to hear kind of like your biggest learning takeaways.
There's so much. You can't underestimate how hard the hospitality business is. It is so hard. It is, I basically we don't manage all 17. So during COVID, we made a lot of investments in other people's deals, which is pretty interesting in the form of preferred equity, which I really like because I got to see how other people operated. I think how I'll answer it is the biggest thing that I've learned is relationships are everything. And the network that you build and the people that you surround yourself with can have real impact on how you grow as a person and how your business grows. So I joined this thing called Young Presidents Organization. You have to be like president of a company to join that. I mean, that for me was also a fake it till you make it kind of story. Like I remember I was joining the like YPO Philadelphia, and hopefully I don't get kicked out of YPO now, but and like I was living in Florida at the time. I didn't even like have an office in our office in Philadelphia because I wasn't there enough. So we had to have this like meeting with the YPO people, and they wanted to do it at your office to like see like, wow, what company you have. So like we took all of the furniture out of our conference room, and like we had like storage from hotels, and we like put all this furniture in the conference room and made it look like my office. I met these people in my office, and which was really the conference room. But what I learned from that is the relationships that I've been able to build from YPO. We created like this small little forum of a bunch of hotel guys, and those people got me through COVID, and many of them were on the podcast. I've learned so much from them and about how they build their business, what tools they're using, how they deal with employees. All of that stuff came from relationships and having an open mind. And I'm a big believer in kind of karma. And I always want to put out positive energy. That doesn't mean you can't be stern and firm, but I do believe that kind of what comes around goes around. And I'm very grateful for those that have been kind to me. And I wouldn't be where I am today without the relationships that I built in the hospitality industry, for sure.
I love it because I think coming into this episode, a lot of listeners can have the perception of, okay, these guys are talking about hotel investments and capital and real estate. Where's the hospitality, right? Where's the moment making, the memory creation, all this other things? What do you have to say when people bring that up? I'm always curious, especially when you're not in the operations piece. A lot of people have a hard time, I guess, maybe clarifying that you are in hospitality, even though you're just on a different role and different category, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm the CEO of our management company. So I am like, when I say hotel business is hard, like it's hard on the real estate side too, but it's like mostly hard on the operations side because it is a business where I have to convince someone to stay in our hotel every single night. I'm not signing long-term leases. And our mission is to create moments in the lives of our guests and team members. And it's something that is key to hospitality. And every great hotel that I've ever been to, the ones that I remember are those that had an impact on me. And one of the things that I've learned about creating moments is you have to kind of know what hotel you are in and create a moment that works for that hotel. Yeah. So what I mean by that is we have a Home 2 Suites hotel in Philadelphia. At one point was the largest in the world. Like, I am not going to create a moment in that hotel like I'm going to create at the Del Mar in Fort Lauderdale. They don't have the expertise. They don't have the budget. The guest isn't expecting it, not looking for it. The moment that I'm trying to create at that hotel, I always told people, because there's like free breakfast, the breakfast attendant, I want her to be like the diner lady where she knows everyone's name. She's calling like the people like hun and babe and like, what can I get for you? And they're made to feel at home. That was the moment I wanted to create at that hotel. Conversely, at the Del Mar, we want to create a bunch of different moments. But one moment we want to create on the food and beverage side is to give the appearance that all the outlets we have in the hotel are not managed by the hotel. So it really depends on what type of hotel you have, what your goal is, but definitely the hardest thing in hospitality is creating moments. And I think what happens sometimes is people create terrible moments, but you want to create the magical moments. And what we've seen is the best way to create moments are to kind of throw out the scripts and just get back down to how you would treat someone coming into your home or coming into, your little picnic, whatever it is, and how you would want to be treated as a person, and not turn our hotel into a commoditized like airline level of service.
Really good. I have more questions, but this one just kind of popped up as you were talking. And so I want to come back. I'll put a pin in the one that I was going to ask you as a secondary, but this is something I'm very curious for because I started at the front desk. I was a front desk agent, born and raised, basically. That's all I did. And then I, of course, touched housekeeping and maintenance and other things when I got into management roles, but wanted to know, what's your opinion and thoughts on a physical front desk, like a literal front desk being between the guest and the agent?
This is a great question because there was a movement probably 10 years ago to eliminate the front desk. And it was kind of around the time when like iPads were really starting to get widely used, and everyone was going to like use and check in with an iPad, and that is going to be great. Whether it's a desk, like a podium, or a desk, like a work desk, or some sort of a cool table, I think you need to have a presence in the lobby.
Yeah.
But what people come to the front desk for has evolved and will continue to evolve. And my buddy Bashar Wali gives this great talk where it's like he's rolling into a hotel at 11 p.m. at night. He has his wheelie bag. He's, exhausted, trudging over to the front desk. He's a professional traveler, so he's reaching for his wallet. Credit card is moving. And as he gets to the front desk, the person says, "How can I help you this evening?" And he's like, "Obviously, I'm here to fucking check into the hotel. What do you mean? How can I help you?" Right? It's just the weirdest thing. But I do think you need that presence in the lobby. And I think what it will continue to evolve in is like more of a concierge, like more of a host. And obviously, they have to get the basics right. But for me, I think lifestyle hotels and experiential properties are the future. And at those properties, the person is really trying to curate your experience and trying to figure out how to make your experience better. Because like the check-in thing, that's going to be handled like with your phone, like Marriott and Hilton already has keyless check-in anyways. But it's the opportunity to serve and to create the moments. And if you took that away and you just had, here's another example. So we're building a hotel in a market, and we were creating the comp set. So like, what hotels are we going to compete against? And there's a hotel across the street. Well, I call it a hotel. It's an apartment. It's one of these apartment stay, like a Sonder kind of thing. And we were saying, well, like that should be in our comp set. They report to Star and it's across the street. Like it looks kind of nice. I think it's okay. And our partner's like, no, absolutely not. We're not putting that in the comp set. And Eric, who runs our management company, is like, why? He's like, it's not a hotel. Basically, what happens is I get dropped off in front. I kind of check in online and I feel like I'm in an apartment building and I just go right up to my room and that's it. And that, I think, is a missed opportunity because it's really only serving like this commodity need for an overnight stay. Mm-hmm. And there's probably better, like Hilton and Marriott are better suited to do that. The opportunity in hospitality, I think, today is differentiating yourself from the traditional courtyards of the world and being different. Being different is not like buying your furniture at West Elm. Like anyone can get cool furniture. Being different is creating the service, the moment. And I think the person who's in the lobby, whether they're at a desk or, they need a desk. Like you can't just be sitting in a random chair because then you'll be thought of as a guest. So you need like that level of status, but they should come around and sit with you and meet with you. But yeah, you definitely need someone, but I think someone is more important than the thing of the desk.
Yeah, very well said. And I have friends over at Romy, and they're based in Miami and New Orleans, but they have actual virtual agents in the sense of, I think a lot of them are based in the Philippines or remotely in the United States, but they're just there. Like there's no desk, there's no place to get a physical key card because it's all smart lock, enabled. But they're just like, hey, we're here to, welcome you. Also, if you have any questions, I'm literally on this screen anytime you want. They even have like a little iPad thing that follows you on the TV and like we'll show you around the lobby. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. Big shout out to them for that. But I think like you're 100% right. The desk in itself, I always felt as an agent separated from my guests, especially when trying to make a moment. When Mr. Rhodes was upset, or Mr. Wall, or Miss Malone, who these are real guests, by the way, that I had, when things were up like wrong, I wanted to create that moment or barrier of no separation. Like, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to serve. I'm not here to hide behind this desk and be staring at my computer screen trying to solve your problem. I'm actually going to solve your problem. And I think, like you said, the missed opportunity is not capitalizing on that lobby environment. So very, very well said. And I want to ask kind of before we wrap up the show, I know we are running a little out of time, but I always kind of was curious leading up into this interview. You and I have had a couple pre-chats. We've been interacted on email, and I just want to know, because I think I've always been super avoidant of having guests like you on the show in the sense of talking capital, real estate, because it's not my world. I'm not educated enough, or at least I don't feel educated enough to really sit down and be able to chop things up with you and like have a educational conversation, if that makes sense. So what advice would you give to any of the listeners who are like me, who are great operators or in operations or in the tech side, but yet are interested and fascinated with the capital world, but just don't feel comfortable or have a little bit of a fear that they're going to say something and sound like an idiot? That's my fear. In front of someone like you, who's well-versed and scripted in the sense of knowing that world of capital and real estate and all the other stuff.
Well, from someone who has asked a lot of dumb questions, you should only feel like an idiot if you pretend like you know something when you don't, and never feel like an idiot when you don't know something and you ask someone to explain it to you or ask someone's opinion. And the reality is, like, I have calls with operations people. We had one today, and I'm like, I know the end result that I want, but you know how this thing gets made and how it's done. Like, you could out-talk me in 100 different hotel things, and I could kind of know what you're saying, but I know enough to be dangerous. And I think people on the operations side should know enough to be dangerous on the investment side, because where conflict happens is when you're not working as a team. And in hotels, you are a team because someone owns the hotel, someone's managing the hotel. You're all working together. It's like when, a revenue or a salesperson is like, I did my job. Like, I got in all this revenue and we're above budget. Like, if you can't make it profitable, that's your problem. How do we make it profitable together? Like, because the revenue person is not going to last if the hotel's not there anymore. So I think it's really important for operations people to learn about the investment side. And one of the best ways to do that is to just understand the hotel P&L. Like, sometimes hotel companies don't share this with their team members, but understand like how a hotel P&L works, profit and loss statement. Understand if you're profitable, understand what different departments cost to operate, understand what it costs to clean a room, these sorts of things. And then from there, hospitality kind of fades back into the real estate side, where it becomes very similar to other real estate asset classes, where the rent and the cash flow is uneven because it's nightly, but hotels have a mortgage, they have capital expenditures, they have debt service payments, they have investors. And I think it's important to expose operations people to that because they make the best investors. The one, you actually just made me think of something. The really interesting thing about hospitality is there's probably very few businesses where it's common for someone to start at the bottom, whether it's like a houseman or a front desk person, and ultimately become to, A, run the hotel, but B, run massive hotel companies. If you talk to any of the leaders of these big hotel companies, most often than not, they will have started at the bottom. And that's very unique. The one thing that doesn't happen enough is kind of the merge of the operations with the capital, where someone rises diagonal. So they're kind of going into the capital side, or maybe they're going in and out and whatever. But it gives you the full picture of the real estate asset class to know that.
Very well said. I love it. And I love that you started as a guy who has asked enough dumb questions. I think that's the best part about being a podcaster is you get to ask dumb questions or maybe play dumb in some scenarios. But I would love to know what inspired you to start your podcast, Masters of Moments. I've become a big fan and advocate of it now that I'm like trying to get into this capital world and understand real estate a little bit more. So I'd love to know what was the inspiration and what was the beginning moment of creating the show?
It's exactly that. It's based. So when I graduated law school, I kind of lost the ability to just randomly go up to people and like push my way into their office because I'm a kid and I'm a student. Like now I'm maybe a competitor or they don't have time for me, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But with the podcast, I'm able to interview people that are amazing, that I really admire, that are inspiring in other real estate asset classes and in addition, hospitality, and ask them a bunch of dumb questions and learn. And in fact, we just launched a new real estate asset class, and I learned about the asset class and really dug into it from a podcast that I like and from some guests that I had on the podcast. So that was a real motivation personally for me to do it. And then for the kind of public version, it would be kind of what you described and probably why you started your business is the hotel business is really niche and there was no one having these sorts of conversations. And I thought the people that were having those conversations were not asking the questions that I would ask as someone in the business. They were asking the questions of like a Channel 6 news reporter. Like, I don't care about that stuff. You know, the reason why your podcasts are successful is because you ask questions that people are driving in their car and asking themselves while they're listening to the podcast. And I think the most successful podcasts do that, where it's like, oh, I was going to ask that question. And they get to the meat of why someone is who they are and why they do what they do. And that just wasn't happening in hospitality investing, maybe a little bit in real estate investing, but it wasn't happening.
Very well said. I think that's exactly the reason why I started. As a hotel manager, I couldn't find anything that was fun to listen to and wasn't boring. And it also had actual meat to the conversation, like you said, in the sense of, I'm a front desk manager, but I want to know about revenue management. I want to learn about my P&L. I want to learn how to benefit and help my housekeeping team. Like, of course, like I want to know these things. Yet no one was having those conversations. They're talking about marketing. And
one thing that you learn is that as you've been in the business for a while, and you've been in the business for a while too, is that, you know, if you're smart and like reasonably successful or kind of smart, like everyone else isn't just so much smarter than you. No. You know, when you're coming up, you know, you can't see behind the curtain, but as you get more experience, you get a peek behind the curtain. And what you realize is everyone's just like you. Everyone's as fucked up as you. Everyone has the same problems you have. Everyone knows what you know. And no one's like this crazy genius. There's 3 crazy geniuses back there, okay? But of the 100 people, there's 3 of them that are crazy geniuses. Everyone else is just like you. And the podcast also helps kind of expose that and share that as well, that we're all just still trying to figure this out together.
I love it. Well, Jake, I want to respect your time. I'm a big fan, obviously, like I said, big fan of the show, big fan of what you're doing. Obviously, I'm going to plug everything into the show notes so our listeners can have all the access to you. But what's the one place, if someone's listening right now and they're like, I got to connect with Jake, where would you want to send them?
JakeWurzak.com. And one of the things I created is I created this little coaching program where people could have access to some of the challenges that you're bringing up. Like, how do I invest in a hotel? How do I own a hotel? And we do twice monthly, like group coaching calls, which is kind of fun. And what's actually inspiring for me is like, I'm considering investing in some of these people that are on the coaching call, like some of the deals that they're bringing forward. So it's like a secret funnel for me of like how to get some good deal flow. But thanks for the plug. It was awesome coming on. I appreciate what you're doing for hospitality because literally you've built an entire hospitality podcasting ecosystem. And frankly, like some of the stuff you're discussing and the shows, like I have like no idea that even existed. So it's like really cool to see that whole world and keep going. And thanks for having me on.
Definitely appreciate those kind words. Obviously, Slick Talkers, you know exactly what to do. Like and subscribe to all things Jake Wurzak. Links are going to be in the show notes. So LinkedIn, website, all the stuff is going to be there. Make sure you show the love. Thank you guys so much. And Jake, as always, appreciate you, my friend. We'll see you guys all again next week. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Wil Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.